Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Keller, the Programming Coordinator at the Westport Library, and thank you all for joining us this evening, whether in this building or from home. Tonight's program is all about writing and Patricia Dunn's new novel, Last Stop on the Six, which offers a look into family dynamics and whether or not anyone can really ever go home again. Our two speakers have a fun program planned for you with writing prompts and giveaways, so let's get started. For those of you at home, please feel free to type in any questions that you have in the Q&A tab, and we'll ask those at the end of this conversation. If you'd like to purchase a signed copy of Last Stop on the Six, the webpage will be running through 9 p.m. tonight, and I'll put the link in the chat later. For those of you who are here, remember to silence your cell phones, please. And we'll have books. Actually, the books are not here, so we will be selling book plate signed books, and you'll get an email when they actually arrive. If anybody here has a question at the end of the conversation, we're going to ask you to go over to the microphone that's on the floor so that everybody at home can also hear you. And that's all the housekeeping, so let's get to the meat of the evening and Patricia Dunn. She was raised in the Bronx. She is the author of the young adult novel Rebels by Accident, and her writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Village Voice, The Nation, and the Christian Science Monitor, amongst others. Dunn has served as the senior director of the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College, where she holds an MFA in creative writing. She is also the co-founder of the Joe Papaleo Writers Workshop in Italy. So let's go there next time. Tessa Smith McGovern is a Westport-based author and writing coach. She teaches at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College and is the host of 2 free weekly writing workshops on Zoom for us at the Westport Library. And Tessa is currently also writing a contemporary fantasy novel inspired by British mythology and pursuing her MFA in writing at the Vermont College of Fine Arts. So I want to thank you both for coming tonight. And ladies, talk to me about Last Stop on the Six.
Thanks so much,
Jennifer.
Thank you so much. So Pat, congratulations. I have to say, first of all, that this book is a bestseller already on the small press best-selling list, which is fantastic. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. So would you like to tell people, give them the gist of what it's about?
Are you kidding? No. So Last Stop on the Six, I got to say, I'm really, the artist who Joe Papaleo, William Papaleo, Joe's the writer who did this art, would be so impressed. And he's in Italy now, so I wish you could see this, but this is beautiful. I just want to thank you, Tessa, and thank you, everybody here at the Westport Library, because this is like, I've never felt like a celebrity before. Anyway, so this is about a young woman who's an activist, but she leaves home before the book starts because she thinks that she started that she caused an accident that her young brother had. The night before he's about to go off, he's a child actor, to Hollywood for his big break. And so she's been away for 10 years, and she can't save her brother, so she decides to save the world, which she doesn't either. But it takes place right at the beginning, of days before we're about to go to the war with Iraq the first time. It's kind of funny to say the first Iraq war with the first Bush, because then there was the second war and the second President Bush. And she gets arrested the book opens up with her being arrested at a demonstration, and then she comes home after being in jail, and it's a one-way ticket from her mother saying, your brother's getting married in 3 days, you have to come home, and she wants to go back to jail. But she does go home, and to face her brother and her family. And it's got this kind of wacky family in an Italian-American neighborhood called Pelham Bay, which is a real neighborhood in the Bronx, where I grew up, inspired by all that. And I could keep going, but I'd probably take less time to read the book.
So I don't want to spoil the end for anyone.
I can spoil it.
Well, no, you haven't spoiled the end. That was a great.
Yeah, okay, that's right, okay.
That was a great setup, so no spoilers. But I will say I was surprised that it's actually a page turner. Like you get to the point.
Oh, you didn't think I could write a page turner? I know Tessa a long time, so I was like, what, you were surprised, what?
I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting something, I mean, I would say it's upmarket fiction, right? Where you've got a great story, but you've also got great writing. As opposed to genre fiction, where sometimes the writing isn't that great, but the story is great. So I was delighted by that and sort of turning pages excitedly. So one of the things that makes it a really easy, fun read is the voice. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking in the sprints and in my class about how you put humor into voice. So how did you approach it? It just flows onto the page, or do you go back and you layer it in, or?
Well, when I knew we were going to talk about humor, because it's a lot of things that people say about the book is humorous, although I'm dealing with, actually some of the few, and I'm not going to name them, but the two people who criticized the book said, how could you deal with these subjects? Like, they're pretty heavy subjects, like rape, and there's other things that happen with humor. And I'm like, I don't know how you could not deal with some of these things without using humor. But, so I felt a lot about how I was going to tell people these fancy ways you can write humor. I have no idea. It's basically just the voice that this character came out. And I think at times I tried to make it less humorous.
Did you?
Well, because it would have been more, I think at the time, more market friendly. This book is, for those of you who want to be inspired, it took 25 years in the making, from the time that I started it to the time that it finally came out into the world.
That does make me feel better.
Yeah. And I wasn't working on it for all 25 years, but I had to become, I guess, the writer and the person who can kind of, it's a little bit autobiographical, but I had to make it more, become the writer that can fictionalize it more to get to the truth that I needed to. But at the time that my agent was trying to sell it at first, Girl on the Train, and there were a lot more serious women fiction that was out.
Right.
And I just couldn't write it that way. It's not who I am.
So you turned down the humor in some places. Did you go back in and consciously sort of beef it up at any point?
Not consciously.
Oh, that's disappointing.
No, not consciously, but I can tell people how to make anything humorous.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay.
First of all, you can't take yourself seriously. And you put your characters in situations that are going to make everybody uncomfortable. So we all had Thanksgiving.
Right.
Or most people, I shouldn't assume that everybody. But, you'll have family gatherings. I would think that there are very few people out there that do not have tension within families, difficult situations, or, there's always somebody that doesn't either want to be there or everybody doesn't want to be there. There's just, you put family together and there's good stuff that's going to come out. And if you have characters that you put them in a situation, but you have them talk about everything but what they really want to be saying, it's funny. Like one of the best things I ever read was a student who had this wonderful dialogue between a husband and wife, and it was really about them talking about wanting a divorce. And the whole conversation was about the peas. It was all about peas. How many peas on the plate, how the peas weren't made right, and it was really all about this couple getting a divorce. So it was funny, but it was also real too, and I think the best humor has to have that kind of stuff that also like kicks you in the stomach while you're laughing. That makes sense? Yeah.
And does it make you laugh first? Is that a prerequisite?
Not much makes me laugh, no. No, I'm kidding. Oh, sorry. See, I'm trying to get you to laugh. It's like, all right, you're working hard here. I don't know always when I'm writing humor. I'm always surprised when people say, oh, that's funny. And I'm like, really? Because I actually look, I'm a big comedy fan. I watch like every sitcom in the world. But when I'm doing it, I don't always know I'm doing it. And I'm always surprised what people find funny. And when my father, who inspired one of the characters in this book, who's passed during COVID, made a lot of, I repeat his jokes, but my last name is Dunn, so anytime you ask my daddy, you done yet? All my life. It's like all these kind of like bad jokes. So those are the kind of jokes that like I expect people to either laugh or roll their eyes at. But the things that people find humorous, I'm like, no, that's just, what's so funny about that? That's the way people are. So.
And then when it comes to being inspired by your own childhood and by your family, was there a dividing line? Like, did you draw certain things and then fictionalize on top of that? What was that split between real and fiction?
Well, when the first draft of the book, which actually got me my first agent, who when she took me on said, love the book, but Canada, it's many years ago, just declared it the year of the death of the novel. Can't sell fiction. You got any nonfiction in you? And I'm like, you gotta be kidding. So I said, yeah, of course. But at that time, I had everything, they say everything but the kitchen sink. It had the kitchen sink, the bathroom sink, everything was in it. There was too much in it. So I had to pull back a lot, but I was also protecting the characters.
For the real life people.
Yes, things that were inspired by real life people, I was protecting the characters in the book, so I had to, and there were many more characters, so I had to kind of, what do they say, kill your darlings. I had to kill some of the people in my family. My nephew, who wasn't even born when I started the book, just asked me the other day, how come I'm not in your book? I'm like, I didn't even know you were going to be in existence when I wrote this book. He's like, well, you better put me in the next book, right? So that's what I kind of had to do, and then I think I had to kind of really figure out, well, so what's the story? And really what I wanted to say. So that question about going home, so I was an activist in LA. I did live in LA, ran away from home for different reasons. Didn't know I was running away from home when I left New York.
Right.
But when I came back, I had to realize you can come home again, but home isn't what you always remember it to be. And maybe it never was. And I think that's kind of what this character kind of experiences. And you kind of almost have to, I know this sounds like the Dorothy syndrome, but you kind of almost have to go home to really find yourself. So it's kind of like...
Oh, no, that's terrible.
Yeah, I know. It's, so I kind of call it a coming of age story 10 years too late. It's kind of like, also my personal story.
Right.
But yeah, so, and then the plot of the book, that was more fictionalized because...
Right. Right. And were there any people who wished that they weren't in the book?
My mother, who is the closest to the real character in the book, which is funny because when people actually, read that character, they think she's the more over-the-top character, and I've actually had to play that character down. She's very happy that she's in the book, but she was a little bit mad that I named the main character Angela, because that's her sister's name. I didn't name the character necessarily after my aunt, but at the time my mother was really angry about that. She wasn't talking to her sister. But she's talking to her now, so it's fine. But nobody's, see, for them to say, I wish I wasn't in your book, they'd have to admit that the character was based on them, and nobody wants to do that, so no.
Oh, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the memoir writers, because we talk about
memoir
this.
writers, I've written essays and short stories where clearly everybody knew who that story was, except the person. And because the person, if it's really like bad stuff, the person's doesn't even see themselves in it.
See, it is possible.
Yes, no,
we
they don't even see
talk about this all
themselves
the
in it.
time, right?
No, I wrote, my mother-in-law also, she passed away, so I guess, I could probably say this even if she didn't, but I wrote my first short story that ever got published. It was called Advices, because my mother-in-law didn't give advice, she used to give advices in the plural, and she called it Advices. And when I started that story, I didn't even know her, but it wound up being about a relationship with a mother-in-law, and it's so much like her, positive and negative. But she did not see herself in it. Everybody else did. But she loved the story, when she thought or was told that it was about her, she just was like, oh, that's great, a story about me. Never sing any of the other stuff in it. So for those of you who write memoir, go for it. Yeah.
From the horse's
Yes.
mouth.
And if you're really worried about it, then just show it to people that you're really, worried about, how they may feel or whatever. But you really got to just write what you're going to write.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about the agent publishing journey, because we have a number of people who are writing books and about to publish.
Do you want me to be inspiring, or do you want me to be truthful?
I want you to be honest and inspiring.
All right. So I've also been teaching writing, as you know, for like 20-something years. I ran a writing institute. I now teach at the Westport Writers Workshop. Want to give them a plug because they're great. And I really believe if you want to get published, there are ways you will get published. There are more ways now than ever. There's this idea that writers have talent and others don't, and that's the biggest myth that I've uncovered, because the people who I started my MFA with, that we would have all said, they're so talented, they're not writing today, because tenacity and hard work does get you.
It wins.
Wins, really, it does. The agent process, you can find an agent, but then the agent's got to find an editor. It's a long haul. It can be very painful. It's a lot of rejection, but there are places that will find you can find a place for your work. I think you just have to be open to knowing that not everybody's going to love you. You want to believe that everybody's going to love your work, and not everybody's your audience. So when you figure out who you're writing that story for and who that audience is, it's easier to find a place, a home for it, and also the right agent for it. And in the old days, you had agents that represented you and all of your work. And now agents will say, I'll do your nonfiction. Another agent will do your fiction. And, because it's so market driven. In the old days, editors would tell the marketing people, or whatever they were called, advertising, I love this writer, I love this story, go sell it. Now marketing tells the editors, this is what we can sell. This is what you need to buy.
Go find it.
So go find it. So it's hard to say to a writer, don't take it personally, but you can't take it personally. You have to kind of write what you're going to write. Because by the time, even if you're writing to the market, by the time you finish writing that story, the market's going to change. But you don't have to do it alone, and that's what I've learned. The biggest blessing is that I figured out you need not just a writing group that's going to critique and give you feedback, but somebody that's got your back, that gets you, and that wants to help you write what you want to write.
Right.
And that when you get that rejection that hit you really hard, and you say, and you're stamping your feet in the parking lot of what used to be Borders or Barnes, or whatever the place was that you were all writing together, and everyone's going to say, no problem, you never have to write again. But then 2 days later, they knock on your door and they say, get up, you got to write, or you got to do some stupid prompt. By the way, I hate prompts. Every book I've ever written, and there's been many, or stories, all started with a prompt. So yeah, it's I was also in my past life a bodybuilder. And there is something to that no pain, no gain, but you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
So do it in community.
So,
and you know that too.
I do, yes. And how do you deal with rejection? How did you, when you first got it, what would be your next step? You get that email and you're like, what would be the very next thing?
Personally, depending on how much I had invested in that particular, because there are sometimes you come so close. The worst rejection is somebody who's read the book and tells you all the great things about it and still can't take it because it's not the right market for them, and they mean it. It's not even personal, but you're like, are you kidding me? Right? You just gave me something I could use as a review, and you're still rejecting my book? So that hits hard. And so you kind of complain, and you stamp your feet, and you kind of close your door, and then you get up the next day and you send it out again. And you send it out again, and you send it out again. And if you've been rejected 1,000 times, then you think, okay, well, and even before that, sometimes you also have to step back and say, all right, is it the work that's being rejected, or is it just the market? That's why you need people around that you can trust, because you want to really believe in your work. It's not you. And sometimes it may be you, but if you're getting no, because you may get feedback from several people.
It's you.
Yeah, that's telling you similar things, like this didn't work or that didn't work. And if you don't want to listen to that feedback, well then, what are you doing? But if nobody's giving you anything specific and they're saying it really just wasn't for us, it's not you. So just keep at it. And when I first started writing, if you self-published, it was only your grandmother, well, not even my grandmother, because she didn't really read, right? But, and she could, but she didn't really like reading them. Well, magazines, but anyway. But in those, nobody would read those books. Now it's a legitimate way to get your work out there, but you have to still go through all the process. You have to go through the whole process. You got to make sure it's copy edited, and you got an editor that's strong, and that you have somebody who helps you with the cover. And I mean, it's a lot of work, but you can do it.
So let me ask you about editing, because one thing I noticed in the book is that there are a lot of acknowledgements of people who, yeah, there's like pages of people who
And
read.
I left people out, 25 years, exactly. Yeah.
So did you just give to one time and then go to fresh eyes for once you revised it?
Well, there are people like, so in my first writing workshop at Sarah Lawrence, where this book started as a short story, and it was not meant to be a novel. It only became a novel because the class I wanted to take the next year, I got into, and I really wanted to study with this one teacher, and I got a call in the summer and said, well, she's going to teach a novel class. Are you writing a novel? And I said, sure, yeah, I'm writing a novel. So that's why I started writing a novel, although I realized, as you can tell from the way I ramble on, that's kind of how I write. I go on and on, and then I edit back. But in that first class was two people that I'm still writing with in a writing group today, Jim and Han, and Kate Brandt, amazing writers, and they loved that story and loved my work, and they supported me, and then other people in that writing group supported me, but we're also honest, especially with Jimin, and you know Jimin. We also taught together for many years. She loves my work, but when she says something, I mean, she's never gonna, and it's the same thing with me. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say bullshit, this is not TV, right? So, I mean, I'll bullshit people on certain things, but never about their work, right? No. So when she tells you something, like she always kind of, it's right because you feel it in your gut.
Right.
And like you want to like punch them in the face, but you walk away. I remember in my first book, she said that it got published. She said, Pat, everybody like in my group said they loved it, and they did, but she said, you got to cut the first 50 pages. And I remember the moment she said this, she was dropping me off at a train station, and I got on that train, and I think I cursed her for like I think it was actually the 6th train, the whole ride into the city. And then a few weeks later, I looked at the book, and I called her up, and I said, you're wrong. I had to cut the first 100 pages. So, you've got to understand where it's coming from. And I'm trying to get back to your question of like who, so over the years.
People who edited. Who helped you with the page turning part?
I think over the years, a lot of people. I mean, the final copy edit was done by a woman who's amazing, named Nancy Adams. My partner and husband is like an amazing editor. Actually, I don't marry for money, and I never did. I'm on my second marriage, or I married for editing skills. And, people like who are in my life usually read my work one way or the other. So I've been in a lot of writing workshops. I've taught writing workshops. So a lot of various, people have read this book.
So as you were going through it, were you thinking to yourself, this is taking so long, why isn't it going faster? Were you having that in your head?
No, that's why it went into like the virtual draw for a long time. I had my first book came out before this book, and I was looking for another project, and it was Jimin who said, go back to that other book. And I'm like, no, that's too much pain. I've already been through with that. It's over. And in her polite way, she kept pushing, and I kind of looked at it, and I shared it with someone I knew who was an editor, Caitlin Alexander, and my agent at the time, who's still my agent, Cynthia Manson, who's amazing, and they both said, look, there's something here, go back to this. And so I did, but then I think I had grown into the writer where I could kind of take that work and make it what it had to be, and I know that's just, which is something Grace Paley used to say all the time. She's a short story writer. She said it would take her 10 years to write a story, not because she worked on it for 10 years, but you had to become the person who could finish that story.
So that's really interesting. Like, could you look back and say, well, I became that person 5 years ago?
It was July 23rd, 19. I think it was a maturity, and I think it was also, teaching and working with people on their books, and because you could see that's why when people are in writing classes and you think, I don't want to read other people's work, you will learn more from reading other people's work in progress than you will ever learn from reading published works often, or even your own work, because you're too close to it, or published works are like untouchable, right?
As good as they're going to be.
Yeah, but when you're working with works in progress and you're trying to figure out like what's working here, what do I have questions about? You can start thinking, it starts to kind of become part of you, and when you go back to your own work, you can see that.
You can do it better. And so was that feedback group, was that weekly or bi-weekly?
It took on a lot of, we're the same people, and then different people have come in. So I think 2 or 3 people have come in and out, but it was weekly at one point, And at the time, we all happened to have young children. Now all of our kids are grown. Yeah, just like, anyway, age,
Past in a
whatever,
blur.
yes. But it was one point weekly, then monthly, now we're weekly again. We sometimes write as a group. At one point, we were always sharing work. Now we don't always do that. Now we sometimes share in small groups because it's just really about supporting each other. So how did you do this week? What are you doing?
Right.
And just getting each other to keep writing.
Right.
Especially during, it was interesting during COVID because some of us finished full books and others couldn't write a word.
Huh.
And not because there wasn't time.
No.
It was too much time. It was just because of a headspace.
Yeah, different. Sometimes we didn't have
So
the
what we were doing
bandwidth.
is, we were doing, a lot of us got online and we were doing Zoom writes.
Right.
So, yeah.
So the reason I'm asking is because I'm wondering how many hours a week a writer should expect to be reading somebody else's work and editing their own work. Obviously, it's how long is a piece of string, but I mean, how many hours a week when you were revising this would you have spent revising it and then also reading other people's work?
Well, if I was, because I teach novel class, I mean, I probably spent more hours reading than writing. I don't know if there's an exact number. Some people I know have to read before they write, and fiction writers I know will often say, and I know I'm like this, they can't read fiction, so they'll read poetry or something different from what they're writing because it's too close. And then other people have to read something similar to what they're writing.
Right.
So I don't know if there's an exact formula, but I do think that when I hear people saying, I can't find a writer's group, or people that get my work, or want to read my work, I will always ask, well, are you reading other people's work?
Yeah.
Because it's really, you give what you get back. So to think that in a class because you're just waiting for your turn.
Right.
I mean, which we all felt that way, right? But
Yeah.
you start realizing that the times that you're not workshopping, you're probably getting more from writing and learning more about writing in those times.
It took me a long time to get that it was actually the editing I was doing on other people's work that was more useful to me than the feedback I was getting on my own.
Yeah, because we're too close to our own work, right?
Yeah.
So, I can raise everybody's kids, perfectly. I can't raise my own kid that way, but yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you is if you were to look back at the beginning writer, what things do you wish you had known then that it took you, how many, 15 years of teaching or 20 years of teaching?
Well, if I could have just lived it and felt it, it would basically just get out of your own way.
What does that mean, though?
So when, I give people, we all prompts, right? They're time writing exercises. Write 10 minutes a day, even 10 minutes every other day, but time yourself and don't even read, you don't even have to read what you wrote. It's just about keeping that muscle going and then just do it because the only thing that's going to make you feel better about your writing is writing. You can talk about it, you can publish, it's great here, and I am so grateful for everybody that's here, but this is not the fun part. And I know it's hard to, people looking at you oh, I wish I was there, because I was in the audience when people would complain about having to promote their books. But no, the fun part really is the writing, but you don't realize it usually until it's over. So spend the time just writing and letting it happen, and don't get in your way, because your head will tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't be or why you can't. And there's always good reasons,
Really good reasons.
I mean, people used to come in my class and talk about, I don't know why, but the number of people that had renovations on their kitchen, I actually had to make it first, after teaching this class for a while, I had to make it a law when you, first day of class, you cannot tell me you did not write because you're renovating any part of your house. But then I had, a flood in my kitchen and had to go through a renovation. I'm oh, now I get it. But then there are reasons. Children are sick, people are sick.
Yeah.
But you can always find 10 minutes. And for a while, my 10 minutes was on the toilet, by hand. And I didn't always read back what I wrote until I was ready to be the editor. But just keeping that muscle going, it's like the old cars. I know I'm aging myself, now cars just start, but you used to have to warm them up. It's if you keep warming yourself up, then when you're ready to spend those 2 or 3 hours, which will come, you can go right into it. Otherwise,
Right.
you're spending that whole time getting used to the characters again.
Right.
And you're also not writing, you're also writing when you're not writing. I mean,
Right.
you know, you're thinking about these characters, and you know you're in it when you'd rather be writing than celebrating like your birthday or going out, and you know, and everyone in your family. When your family thinks you're crazy because you say, "What do you want for your birthday?" and you're like, 2 days where nobody talks to me, and your mom's calling up and saying, "What's the matter? Did you have a fight with, you know, your husband? Who you met? What happened? Are you sick or whatever?" And you're like, "No, I just want to write." When they start asking you those questions, you know that you're really into your story.
Right, yeah, that's a good place to be, but sometimes it's hard to get to.
Yeah, it is, but
Yeah.
yeah. And you only get there, like a wonderful friend of mine who was a therapist said, the child in us will never want to sit down. The adult has to make that child sit down, not by abuse. Yeah, I should put that in there, right? Now, don't call social services on yourself. But when you get yourself to sit down, then the child will play and the writing will happen. But that, making that time, and I will also say that when I'm starting the work, which is hard now, it was very hard during COVID, I don't like to be in my house. Like I have to kind of be in a public area. I think because I grew up in a loud family and I used to do a lot of work on the subways, I have to be kind of in a coffee house where there's a lot of things going on. When I'm in the work, it has to be quiet, and then I can close the
Right.
door. But it depends on what stage you're in. So it doesn't always have to be at that same desk, but you do have to figure out what space is going to work for you.
Yeah.
And figure out what kind of writer you are. I mean, what I realized
We
Yes,
have,
yes.
so let's hit the pause button there, because
Yeah.
that's a big topic, so let's unpack that a little bit. How do you figure out who you are?
Well, I remember I was in a writing class with somebody who I'm now in a writing group with, and we were all sharing, so what time of day do you write? And this woman said, I write every day at 5 a.m. And I remember, that's the writer I want to be. And I tried it for maybe about a week. I mean, I almost like, by 3 in the afternoon, I almost killed myself trying to do that. I was like, how? And then I didn't know her that well. Actually, this is how we actually became friends. I just pulled her aside after class. I said, how do you get up at 5 a.m.? And she's like, I grew up on a farm. So then as I got to know her, 8 o'clock at night, she can't even, she's making less sense than I'm making now, right? She cannot even put words together. So I started realizing that we are who we are. So
Right.
I keep a notebook. I don't do it as religiously as I used to do. When I would write, I just would note how I felt about what I was writing and how I felt just myself in that moment. And then I started figuring out, oh, I'm a 3 o'clock in the afternoon writer. That was my best time. Now I worked at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it wasn't always, like the most ideal time, but you just figure out what's going to work for you. Some people are great at night. Some people are great in the morning. Some people don't write every day, and that's fine. I remember Stephen King, people always hear that he says that he writes every day of his birthday. Well, then I heard him in an interview, and he said, that's not true. And I'm like, yes. And then he said, I write every day, even on my birthday. And I'm like, screw you.
Damn you.
But anyway, but he also didn't believe in himself. Carrie was thrown in the garbage. Everybody knows that. It was his, I should remember her name. His wife was also a writer who pulled it out, and she sent it in, and that made his career, right? So we have to find people because writers don't trust your instincts.
No.
Get somebody around you that you trust that can tell you, keep going. Because our best stuff, we think is our best stuff, usually isn't, and the stuff we're ready to trash is usually our best stuff. But
Yeah, that's disturbing, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
it's all disturbing. And if you have a choice and you don't have to write, don't write. There's so many things that you could do that are much more enjoyable. Parachuting, I'm going to do that someday. That's probably a lot more fun than writing.
So, do you have any tricks that make writing more fun for you?
I write, well, like I said, writing sometimes in groups or with other people. During COVID, we would do meetings online. So we would literally just time ourselves. We did it in person and then online. And we'd say, all right, for 20 minutes, we're just going to write nonstop. And then we'd stop and we'd get to talk. And then we'd write. So that helped writing in groups. When I'm in something, it's fun because I'm just into it. But I also I'm one of these people who plays music, but I play the same song over and over because I get into that rhythm, which everybody that's around, if you're in the house, you're just like, oh my God, is she ever going to stop listening to the song? And I live with a musician who's like, play anything else. And it's usually something like Neil Diamond, which is not people's favorite and who I live with, but there's a song that for whatever reason I've connected to with that, and I'll play that over and over. Or, sometimes it's lighting candles. It's whatever I do,
So was
to
this
make
written
fun.
to a Neil Diamond song?
This was written to the Pretenders. Kid, was a song. Neil Diamond, Jersey Boys, not the soundtrack, but the original. I'm saying Jersey Boys, and it's like before he was Jersey Boys. Somebody help me from the audience.
Frankie Valli.
Thank you, Frankie Valli, in the Four Seasons. So certain songs would be played over and over. Yeah. Frankie Valli, I think, in the last part.
Do people do that here? Do you write to songs? No? Okay, so it might be worth trying. Yeah.
No, but it's just because it's a way of like blocking out, and it's kind of a rhythm.
Yeah, and getting back into that headspace. So tell us too about your newsletter, which is kind of hilarious.
Oh,
It can be very helpful.
so it's called How Not to Write, and really what it is, at the bottom line, it's about self-promotion, because that's what it's all about, our egos, and just getting the world to know all about us. And we try to figure out sneaky ways of like telling people about our book without telling them about our books and writing. It's like, yes, before you buy our book, let me give you. So basically, I tell people all these ideas, and now I'm sharing other people's ways that we don't write. So I do a lot of great things to avoid writing. And I think my favorite thing that I did during COVID, that I was working on a serial killer book, which I finally finished. But in order not to write, I started microwaving dirt. And people were like, what do you mean microwaving dirt? Now, there is some reason to it, because I never had a green thumb, but I started a garden, and all of a sudden I started keeping these plants I had in the house alive. And I started buying more plants and more plants. And so I had like these 20 plants, but then there started being gnats in the house. And I couldn't get rid of these gnats. And I was looking up everything and trying everything. And then a friend of mine, who knows everything because she's from Canada. The Canadians seem to do everything. They can fix your car and like do your hair, and they know about gnats. And she said, if you microwave the dirt first, it'll kill off any of the possible eggs when you get the dirt, whatever she said. But she thought I was going to microwave like a few pots. I think I microwaved, I don't know, probably about 5 pounds of dirt, like 5 big bags or maybe more. So it took me maybe about 4 or 5 days, and I was just planting. Anyway, so that got me not to write for a lot of hours. What I basically do is I share all these ways you can avoid writing, because don't fight it, just don't write. And then if you really need to write, here's a few things you could do.
So all of that was in the newsletter about microwaving dirt, and I'm reading this, and it made me laugh, but I'm thinking, why am I reading a newsletter about
Yeah, that's another
not
way. Read
writing?
my newsletter instead of writing.
But it did actually end up making me want to write.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very clever and very sneaky.
Well, if somebody's going to say microwave dirt or write, you would have said that to me, I would have said, okay, I'll write. So.
Okay, I think, yes. Jennifer, do you need us for that?
I do have some questions.
Yes.
Oh, real questions, or we're making them up here?
Yeah, no, we have
Oh, okay. I usually make them up, so it's good.
I'm not making up any of these questions. So, Pat, the first question that we have from online, and remember, folks in the audience here, you can ask questions as well. We'll just ask you to go over to that microphone. We have, the first person says, thanks for being here, Pat. And whose humor do you relate to most in books, movies, songs, or plays?
Good question.
Oh, that's a good one. It's like when people ask you, who's your favorite author? You're like, let's see.
One book, if you could only have one
No,
funny
humor.
book.
You mean, so humor. And he writes plays, and Steve Martin, Amy Sedaris. I like David, her brother, but I like Amy better.
Do you?
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of, let's see. There's quite a few people.
That's good, though. Amy Sedaris, I haven't looked at her stuff recently.
Yeah, and it changes depending on my mood.
Okay.
Okay, so second question is, what is your estimate of how many times you revised your story over the 25 years?
So in my basement, when I used to actually collect paper, I have probably, and I'm not kidding, a stack of revisions, because I used to print them out that high. Yeah. And that was just in the first 5 years.
All the different versions?
Yes. Well, then I realized trees were important. And so now I probably would say over 25 years, at least 1,000, probably more.
1,000.
Well, when you think about it, because when you know, even when we think we did our first draft, how many drafts have we written before it's our first draft? So, but completely through, several hundred times.
Several hundred.
Yeah, at least.
Yikes. Yikers.
But I've written other things in between.
Yes.
And I did get another book. And actually, the book that I got published, I started writing because I wanted to get away from this one. So I said, I'll just play with this thing. And
Oh, that's interesting. Hmm.
so,
Right.
yeah.
So, Pat, have you ever blogged towards a book?
Blog towards a book? You mean like, have I kept a blog? I'm not sure what blog towards a book means. I'm not that
I'm
smart.
guessing, have you ever started a blog that turned into a book?
Oh!
Or is your newsletter sort of like that?
No, I've never started a blog that turned into a book, but if anybody wants to offer me a deal, I will like
She's
take
available.
it. Actually, if anybody actually wants to give me, you know, you're going to pay me to write, just give me the subject, I'll write you. I'm very good at writing the topic. No, but I've never blogged towards a book, but that is, I know a lot of people that have done that, and that's a great way to, I know people that have like text towards books that has worked out, because there's also even emailing, because there are ways that you can kind of feel open, that doesn't feel so formal about it. So.
Right.
So I guess I've emailed towards books, yes, because I used to send emails to myself about books or things I wanted to write that turned into books.
Okay, and how exactly do you write a memoir without saying exactly who the people are in that memoir?
Well, all right, so this is not a memoir, and I have to say but how you write a memoir without, you just don't say who they are.
Give
Now-
them different names.
Well, okay, here's the reality. Joyce Carol Oates many years ago said that, yeah, if you really like are worried about what people are going to think, write under a pseudonym. We now live in a world where you cannot hide. And actually, even that has, you know, I don't know, that's Italian or that's, you know, that has a certain, if you're writing a character about anything, like, you know, a character who's an exterminator or a serial killer, you're lucky if you're a serial killer because that's what they want to know. They want to know, like, why are you the person writing about this, even if it's fiction. There used to be a time where that didn't matter, right? The author could be hidden. You can't be. So even if you're writing memoir, it's really hard to hide, right? Like Ferrante, right? She kept her identity in Italy for a long, long time. As soon as she came to the U.S., they figured out who she is. So what I would say is you've got to write what you're going to write. So don't edit yourself first. Write what matters to you. And then if you're really worried about hurting someone's feelings or that's going to make or someone in your life is so important and you think your work may be damaging in some way, then share it with them and see if it's okay.
Deal with it afterwards.
Deal
once
with it
you've
afterwards,
done the writing.
you know, but
If you have to edit it,
yes,
you can
and if you
edit
want,
it.
and you just call them another name, you know, if they're not going to mind, but you just don't want the world to know. And you can say in a memoir, I'm not using the real names, period.
Right, right. And I don't support this, but Anne Lamott said that if people didn't want to be written about, they should have behaved better.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
I think that's true.
It's true.
Because those are the people that you're going to
Yeah.
remember,
Yeah.
right?
Or like my dad says, you know, like, just call me anything but late for dinner, you know, that kind of thing, yeah. Boom, boom. All right, nobody got that? I thought that, anyway.
Okay, so the next question we have online, is anybody here wanting to ask questions? I feel like it's just me. She says, thank you, I love your humor, and thank you so much for being here today. She would appreciate knowing how you decide on the most effective titles for your work.
Okay, so titles are hard. This book was called The Other Side of What for most of the whole time.
The other side of what?
Of what?
Oh, the other side of
And
what?
what, which is, it's noted in the book, and the other side of what came from, and there's a line in the book where, you know, we never asked where people were from, because we always knew they were from the other side. We never asked the other side of what, right? So in the book, if you read it, you know, it meant Southern Italy, right? Well, that title worked less and less for this book, and it actually probably works more for fantasy, but I had to come up with something else, and we came up with, you know, Bronx Girl in Birkenstocks because of the activists that she played, but then Birkenstocks are now trendy, so that can be used, and I was at work probably like, and it was 1 a.m. in the morning, and I wasn't even trying to think about titles, and I don't know what hit I think I was looking at something online and I saw the train and I'm like, oh, 6.
It just hit you.
Yeah, and then Alan, my husband, I said, I had like the last stop on the 6. And I think Alan said, take out the. And then Marcia, who's another wonderful writing teacher, said, no, take out, make it the number 6. You know, so everybody like kind of, and that stuck. And that actually, I get more people that are attracted to the book because of the title, the 6 train, or, you know, they relate to it, and the other title, which I still love to this day, I've not ever used for anything, but maybe would not have probably done as well. Mm-hmm. So it's hard. Titles are hard. And sometimes the editor will come up with a title that will be completely different. So you got to be willing to give up on titles too, like let them go.
Don't have it locked in cement.
Yeah.
Mental cement.
Do you ever take titles from like poems or other people's writings much?
Not on purpose, no.
I actually made a note of something Pat had written in the book that jumped out as a title. I have it there somewhere.
You can have it.
I do. I have it here somewhere.
So you could use it.
Yeah, it just seemed like a short story title.
Oh, I want to see the story. No, I don't. A lot of writers I know do. Whatever inspires you. Sometimes titles will inspire me, but I don't usually use it as. I mean, I know poets. They're very great at like giving each other, you know, honoring each other and using titles and stuff like that from other works. But no, not that I know of. I mean, I may have unconsciously.
I do think you have to wait until you finish the story, because parts, and so it's harder
Yeah, I mean, and
to
sometimes
title
like the title kind of gets you, or you come up with a title, and that gets you writing,
Gets
and
you
then
through,
it changes.
yeah.
Yeah, so like you come up with great titles, Tessa. Like so.
Thank you.
You know, so great marketing and yeah.
Now, ladies, I thought that at some point you said that you were going to give a writing prompt during this.
We were going to sort of freewheel a little bit because we didn't know how the time would go, but Pat does have a great prompt, which if you have pen and paper with you, we were thinking we would give it as a to-go prompt, if that's okay.
Yes, but people should do this at home, and we know where you all live, and I will find out where you all live here, and come to your house to make sure you do it. The only thing about the prompts is that you really have to time yourself. So 10 minutes, that's all you have to do, is just start a timer and keep going. The trick is you don't stop, and if you can't think about what to say while you're writing, you could just say, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't even know why I wasted my evening listening to that woman speak. You write anything that comes to mind, but you don't stop until the 10 minutes are up. So I'm going to give you the official prompt that we talked about, and I'm going to give you something that you can use as an open-end thing that actually just gets me going. And a lot of people have used this. And this is like 2 10-minute prompts to get you started. All I know for 10 minutes, whatever comes to mind. And then you do right after that for another 10 minutes, all I don't know. An alternative is I remember. And another 10 minutes, I don't remember. And then if you really want to keep yourself going on a roll, what you do, I call it the 21-day challenge, which I'll just give to everybody here, is that first day, you do the 2 10-minute prompts. So let's say you do all I know, all I don't know. The second day, and every day after that, you use the last line of what you wrote the day before. And you do not read anything that you've written until you've written for 21 days. If they're not consecutive, that's fine, but it has to be 21 days before you read back anything you wrote. And the only other trick to that is you have to find somebody that you can text every day to say, I wrote, I didn't write. And if you didn't write, you especially have to text because it helps you to go back to it the next day, because it may not be 21 days consecutively. So find somebody here or in your writing class as your partner. And then after the 21 days, if you actually sign up for my newsletter and you write me or go to my email, I will tell you the second stage, which of this, the 21-day challenge. But the other prompt.
So what's your website?
Oh, my website is Patricia Dunn, author. Very original. patriciadunnauthor.com.
Okay.
Okay. patriciadunnauthor.com. Okay. And then the other fun prompt, if you want to actually, we all went through, I think, did I say this already? Was I talking to, I wasn't, we were just talking about this. Okay. So I'm losing all concept of time and space. All right. So it's very, everybody has gone through, holidays or events when you have family. If you put people in a situation, it could be 2 people, but more than 2 people often this could be great, and you have them like talking where one of the characters, for whatever reason, doesn't want to be there, and whatever they're talking about, there has to be something that's not being said. So if somebody's really, you know that one of your characters is really angry that their sister, I don't know, just slept with their husband, whatever it is. Whatever the thing is that's not being talked about. But instead they talk about something else. Like I think I said one of the funniest things I ever read was it was a student writer who wrote a dialogue between a husband and wife, and their whole thing was all about peas. And you just knew from what they were saying, the way they were saying it, the gestures, the things they were doing about these peas, that they were ready to get divorced. And that's really what this was all about, how their marriage was ending. But it was funny, and it was also tense. And even if it's not a humorous situation, you put people in a situation, have them talk about something that's not really what they want to say, and see what happens.
Yeah, a good example of that is Hills Like White Elephants by Hemingway. You can find it online, and it's not very long, and it's all dialogue. It's super easy to read.
Yeah, and it's not funny though. But
it's not funny at all.
But that's what it's about, and it's funny though. Yeah. But look at the time period when that story first came out. People did not know what it was about. Now, when you read it, you're like, of course, it's about. Well, we won't give it away, but most people probably have read it. But if it's not like giving away much. But it's like it's about this woman who's talking about possibly having an abortion.
Right.
Now, given the context that we live in, you get it right away. But when that story was written, you really had to really think about what are they really talking about. But there was so much tension in what was not being said.
Yeah, yeah, and the cruelty in the dialogue, the coldness was. So it was not a bit funny, but it is a good example. Yeah.
Well, it could, and to some people maybe it is funny because there's a lot of.
I don't know.
Like you said, So any questions or anybody in the audience? Somebody has to have something they want to say. You want to ask something, I could tell. The gentleman with the glasses, yes, I'm making eye contact with.
It's okay. Nothing? We don't have to force anybody to ask questions.
See, that's the other thing that's so funny. When you force people to do things they don't want to do.
That's very true.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you, Pat and Tessa, for coming tonight, and thank you all for watching either here or at home. We love having you here, so thank you so much. And feel free to purchase your copy.
And you also get a free bag, too.
Yes, tonight you get a free bag.
Yes.
So remember to purchase or borrow from the library. Last stop on the 6th. And we hope to see you at future events. Remember to keep watching westportlibrary.org for future events and recordings of past events.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
And remember, librarians are heroes.